Hello there guys, I'm Unstable Voltage and today I'm going to be taking a look at Hearts of Iron 4, the latest grand strategy game from Paradox Development Studios. Paradox are the developers behind strategy games such as Crusader Kings, Europa Universalis, Victoria and more recently Stellaris. As the name suggests, Hearts of Iron 4 is the fourth game in this World War II themed grand strategy. Now, while I personally have a lot of experience with Paradox strategy games, this is my first attempt at playing any of the Hearts of Iron series, so I will be approaching this as a brand new player to the franchise. Before we actually go into the game, let's just quickly have a look at the options and talk about performance, because this is a question that has been coming up quite a bit recently. So first of all, just looking at some of the other options here, we can look at the game options. Most of the things in here are fairly standard. For Paradox games, your autosave interval. You can also play the game cooperatively. There is a multiplayer mode for this game. You can have up to 32 players in the multiplayer, but you can play co-op. You've also got these options for using external web browsers and using an offline wiki as default. A lot of this is because in-game information and tutorials are presented to you in the form of a link back to the wiki, and that is something that I will get onto shortly. Quick look at the controls. All you've got in here is basically mouse zoom and scroll speed. There are no remappable key bindings, which is a little bit of a shame. The audio options are pretty much what you would expect. Got separate sliders for your master volume, effects, music and ambient objects. And then if we go and look at the video, you've got quite a few options in here. You've got your mode, obviously full screen and windowed, resolution, your refresh rate, multi-sampling, texture quality, and then you have a various number of checkboxes to turn on and off various things that display during the game. Now, it's worth saying that I have noticed a few performance issues while playing. Now, bear in mind my system isn't the newest. I'm running an Intel i7 2600 at 3.4 GHz with 12 GB of RAM and an NVIDIA GeForce 770 2GB, everything running the latest drivers on Windows 10, and I have been noticing some very noticeable stuttering and frame rate drops. Now, as I said, my system isn't the highest spec there is, but that said, this is a strategy game where most of the time you're just looking at a map, and from the top down position with some very low polygon count 3D models. It shouldn't be too taxing on the system. However, with the release of Stellaris just a few weeks ago and widespread reports of performance issues over a varying range of system specs, including the high end, it looks like it might just be that the Clausewitz engine is starting to show its age and maybe needs a bit of an overhaul if Paradox continue to use that engine on their future installments. That said, the graphics themselves are functional and they're quite appropriate to the game. They set the theme nicely. They really do try to make what is essentially a map actually pop out and come alive, and that's something I'll show you once we get into the game. Just going back to the audio, the music in this game I have found so far to be absolutely fantastic, as I do with a lot of the Paradox games. It fits the theme of World War II absolutely fantastically. It's got a very Band of Brothers feeling to it, and I think I'll just shut up for a minute and let you listen to the music. So, as always, excellent work from Paradox's composer. Let's go back and look at the game. So obviously we have the multiplayer options. We also have the single player, and there is a tutorial. Now, this is a personal bugbear of mine, tutorials in strategy games, particularly Paradox games, because the Paradox Grand Strategies are some of the most in-depth and complex strategies that you can play on the PC to date. Now, it's very important in a strategy game that you be able to understand all the mechanics and how everything works, because if you don't understand how something works, it makes the game very, very difficult. And while some people do actually enjoy the process of learning a game by trial and error, there's an increasing number of players in the current generation of players that really don't have the patience to put hours and hours and hours into a game just to learn how to play it properly. The amount of material that comes with strategy games these days, particularly Paradox games, is rather sparse. Hearts of Iron 4 was provided to me, and bear in mind that this is a press copy and it's pre-release, but it was provided to me with a manual in the form of a quick start guide, which I think was about 30 pages or so, that goes through and highlights some of the major UI elements and basically tells you what all of those buttons and things do. Now, the tutorial itself starts off by holding your hand through the beginning of the campaign as Italy, and it actually gives you 15 mini objectives and sort of tells you step by step how to complete them. Unfortunately, it's not really teaching you anything, as it turns into more of a Simon Says game, where you're basically pressing the buttons on the interface that you're told to. By the time you've completed those 15 objectives and the game lets go of your hand, you're kind of left like you're in at the deep end and you don't really know what you're supposed to be doing and why you're supposed to be doing it. And I find more and more strategy games these days are relying on people having to either visit the wiki page or watch YouTube videos and use various sources of third-party information to actually learn the game. Now, while the game itself does have some pop-ups that will actually give you information about various elements of the UI when you click on them, that again is actually relying on the player exploring the interface and clicking on various options, and even then the information that it gives you, it's more telling you what the button is rather than what the button does and why it does it. We're not going to go into the tutorial, we will go in and have a look at a game that I already have in progress, but if you choose to start a new game, you have two different starting scenarios, different periods in history. You either have the August 1939 start, which is right before the war. So basically at this point, world tension is high. All of the sort of political alliances have already been formed, and if you start at this date, your country's pretty much prepped for war and you're ready to get straight in to the meat of the combat. The other option is the January 1936 start, which means that some of the political alliances aren't formed, and it gives the game a little bit more scope for a change, as in it's not necessarily going to represent what happened in history. And this also gives you more time to actually build up your nation's infrastructure and actually play more of the building and resource management game, as opposed to just jumping straight into the war. Once you've selected your scenario, you get to choose which nation you want to play as. Got all of the major nations from Axis and the Allies, France, the United States, the UK, the German Reich, Italy, Japan, Soviet Union, and you have got other countries. If you go into other countries, and we can just go in here, you actually see the map. So this is what the map looks like for Hearts of Iron 4. So you can see all of the major nations there. So obviously you can also play as people like Finland, Sweden, Norway, Latvia, Estonia. Hungary's in there, Czechoslovakia, Austria, Switzerland, Yugoslavia, Albania. So lots of different nations that you can play as. You've got your difficulty level, of course. You've got an Iron Man mode, and you do have historical focuses, which basically, if that is ticked, the alliances and rivalries are more likely to be similar to history than with this unticked, where it could be quite a random game. Let's go in and load the game that I have already been playing. This is my United Kingdom game, which I've been running a Let's Play series for, but I want to go in and sort of show you guys a little bit about the game, let you see what the game looks like running, and also explain a little bit about the game's mechanics and what you should expect to see in Hearts of Iron 4. So this is the actual game interface, and if you are familiar with any of the previous Paradox games, you'll probably notice a relatively familiar layout to the user interface, and that is because it's using the same engine. So the actual game of Hearts of Iron really has three major themes or major phases to it. First of all, you have the diplomacy. Very similar to things like Europa Universalis 4. You can go to another nation, and you've got various different things that you can do with them. You can sort of guarantee their independence. You can try and improve your relationship with them to get other things like military access, non-aggression pacts. You can also send volunteer forces to them if they're involved in a war. Maybe you want to send them some of your units to help them. And you can also try and do things like staging political coups or boosting party popularity, because each nation's political party affiliation affects what they are allowed to do within the game. So for example, playing as the UK, a Conservative party, you're not allowed to just go randomly declaring war on other nations, whereas of course somebody like Germany or Hungary can actually just go and start as many wars as they want to. So you've got the political side of the game, and that is certainly more important if you use the 1936 start, because you want to try and form alliances and coalitions early on. You've then got the... it's also worth mentioning that the tutorial never really explains the diplomacy in any way, shape or form. It's one of the things that it really glosses over. If you click the diplomacy button, it does come up with a pop-up and basically says, this is the diplomacy screen where you do diplomacy. That is pretty much the theme of it. It doesn't really tell you anything or what it's used for and how it works. As well as the actual diplomacy itself, you've also got your own nation, which allows you to do various different things. So as time goes on, you actually gain political power, and you can use this political power to add certain advisors to your nation, which will give you certain boosts and bonuses, such as allowing your factories to work more quickly. You can also boost research and production, so you can have various companies that will help you build your planes and your tanks and your other war machines to either speed them up or give them certain bonuses. And you've also got this thing which is your national focus. Now these do differ based on the country that you're playing as. Some of them require certain things to have happened and certain prerequisites to be true before you can do them. But these national focuses are a varying number of things that they give you, such as additional units, additional buildings, additional strength on certain unit types, and the actual list of things you can choose is quite extensive. So this is the United Kingdom focus tree, and as you can see, there's quite a big list of things that you can choose, and this is your national focus, and this sort of determines which direction you're going to take your country in diplomatically. So that's the sort of diplomacy side of things. The second thing is the construction, which really takes place in two parts. First of all, you've actually got your building construction. So you have the ability to build civilian factories, and you're limited to how many you can build because each province that you own only has a certain number of open slots. Civilian factories are the backbone of your production in Hearts of Iron, and they actually allow you to build all other building types. So if you want to build things like military factories, dockyards, refineries, rocket sites, infrastructure, air bases, anti-air guns, radar stations, all of these things are actually built using your civilian factories. So the more civilian factories you have, the more quickly you can build your buildings. Civilian factories can also be traded away to other nations in exchange for various resources, and resources are used for building your war machines and supplies. Now, outside of your civilian factories, you also have your military factories. Your military factories are actually used to build anything that is going to supply your army. So, supplies for your infantry, as well as planes, ships, and other vehicles. Sorry, not ships. The ships are built from your dockyards. So, your dockyards are actually the only buildings that build ships, and you can only build ships with the dockyards. You can build synthetic refineries that allow you to produce synthetic oil and rubber if you don't have any as a natural resource. Natural resources are located in the map. There are a number of map modes, as you would expect from any Paradox game. If we just go and have a look at our resource map here, you can see in some of our provinces we are producing aluminium and steel. Over here we're producing some rubber and some oil, and that's probably because there is a synthetic factory there. Some places also produce things like tungsten and chromium, but you may find that you have a resource deficit and you may need to trade away some of your civilian factories for some of those resources, or if it's just rubber and oil you're short of, you can build a synthetic factory. Then of course you've got buildings like naval bases where you can base your fleets. You've got land and coastal forts that you can use to give some added protection to your provinces, as well as things like anti-aircraft installments, air bases to place your aircraft. And you've also got infrastructure, which is basically almost like the logistical backbone of your nation. This allows you to get more supply to different provinces, which means you can support a larger army. And you also have the ability to convert civilian factories and military factories backwards and forwards between one another. So the second part of construction is actually production. Now, production is mainly using your military factories and your naval dockyards to produce all of the equipment and vehicles that you will need for the war. This is where you produce infantry equipment and supplies, tanks, ships using your dockyards, aircraft, motorized vehicles to support your infantry, artillery, anything that your army is going to use. And the actual construction interface isn't too difficult to understand, and to be fair, this is one of the places where the tutorial is actually useful. The tutorial does actually do a good job of teaching you how production works. So most of these things that you build, particularly equipment and tanks and aircraft, go into a reserve stockpile, and as you can see here, if I click on logistics, it tells me how many of these things that I have in reserve, tells me how many that I am producing each month, and how many that I require. So at the moment I have 1,900 artillery surplus. If I were to suddenly go and create an artillery division, they would start using the artillery from that surplus and we'd start to get a deficit. So we'd have to start another production line, add artillery to that production line, and assign some factories to it. The more factories you assign to a production line, the more quickly the production line works. However, each production line does have a production efficiency. Adding a new factory to a production line reduces the production efficiency for a period of time until it eventually creeps back upwards to the production efficiency cap. So you really do have to manage what you are producing and in what order to really try and maximize the output from the factories that you have. The final part of your construction is actually training new units. So you have the ability to put together new units. You can just say, okay, I would like an infantry division, click on the train button, it will add it to the queue. I can say how many infantry divisions I want it to train in series. So let's train 3 divisions in series, and I can then set a location where I want that division to be deployed. It will then tell me how many supplies are available for that division. So as we can see here, we've got 97% of the equipment needed to supply that division, and it will also tell us how long it's going to take to train them up. It is worth noting that you can actually train your divisions in parallel as well as in series, but of course doing that will mean that you will actually train them up quicker, but you will burn through your equipment reserves more quickly. Now, you'll see a thing over here called the Division Designer, and this is something that's actually very, very important to the game. And to be honest, this is again where the tutorial falls down completely. The tutorial shows you that the Division Designer exists, but never really goes in depth to tell you how it works or what you should do with it. So within each of your divisions, you can actually see the view by battalions, and you can see the regiments within the battalions. And what you can actually do is within each of these, if we look at this infantry division has 3 battalions, and each of these battalions has 3 regiments of infantry. As well as the 9 regiments of infantry, they also have an engineer company and they have a field hospital, which is something that I have added. You can have up to 4 support things. Maybe there's a 5th one you can unlock later on. But if you click a button here, we could, for example, click this and add a recon company, which you can see would give us an extra 10% movement in various different terrain types. Does reduce our organisation slightly and increases the production cost. Makes the weight of the army slightly heavier, which means it'll need more supply to keep it going, but we can go ahead and click that and add it to our current division, and the stats over here on the right hand side show us what difference this has actually made to the overall stats of that division. That's absolutely fantastic. Now we could also go in here and add extra things to the division. We could add artillery, we could add anti-air, we could add marines, paratroopers, mountaineers, etc. Now what you will notice is every time I add something, it actually increases this number down here where I have the save button. And this is because you need a certain amount of experience to create a division or even edit a division. If I wanted to go in here and add something else, I can't because I don't have enough experience. Now there are three ways to get experience for your army. First of all, combat. Second of all, if your army isn't at war, you can get them doing exercises. Doing exercises actually causes attrition, so it will use up some of your army equipment and supplies, but it does allow them to gain experience at a relatively slow rate. The third option is via your national focus, because some of the options within the national focuses will give you free experience. Now the problem is, because the tutorial doesn't really teach you how the Division Designer works, and doesn't really go as far to teach you what sort of battalions and regiments you should put together. So like if we go here, we could add an extra battalion, we can add an infantry battalion, or if we wanted to, we could go and add an armoured battalion, but we can't even afford to do that because we don't actually have enough experience. And if you start messing around with this, and this is something I found out to my peril in my Let's Play, went into my into my infantry division and originally added an artillery support regiment or company, and what I noticed that did is it actually gave me a penalty to my movement. And the problem was I'd hit save and it cost me some experience, and then I didn't have any experience to revert it back, and all of my current infantry divisions that were already deployed then started getting artillery sent to them. So any changes you make to an existing division will affect all the divisions of that type that you already have on the map. So that is definitely something to bear in mind. So combat takes place over 3 main theatres. You've got your land combat, where you are using your infantry, your cavalry, and your armoured vehicles. You've got naval combat, using your ships, of course, and then you've got the air combat. Now, the interfaces for these different things can be a little bit confusing. In order to use your navy, you need to select a fleet from one of your docks. Now, all of my fleets are actually out and about at the moment getting stuff done. There is a fleet over here, so I can go ahead and select that fleet. And as you can see, by selecting this dock, I actually have 2 navies over here. I'm going to hit G just to group them all together. And you can see how many ships we have in total in this navy. There's 11 destroyers. We can go ahead and assign an admiral to this navy if we want. And then there's a number of different things that you can actually get your navy to do within an area. So they're currently on hold, but you can either get them to patrol, looking for other ships. You can get them to search and destroy. Now, search and destroy won't allow them to cover as large an area, but they will do more damage. You can get them to try and raid enemy convoys, or you can get them to escort your own convoys. Performing these options is relatively simple. It's pretty much just a case of clicking on the appropriate button and then right-clicking on the province you want them to serve, and the ships will go off and do that for you quite automatically. So the naval interface isn't too difficult to get to grips with. Then there's the air interface, which is done by selecting one of your air bases. When you select an air base, you will see the air wings that you have available, how many planes you have. So we've got 64 close air supports here. We've also got 48 tactical bombers here. We could go ahead and create a new air wing using some of the planes that we have in reserve. Once you have an air wing created, all you need to do to deploy it is click on the air wing that you want to have. With that air wing selected, drag it over onto this side. So we've got, for example, tactical bombers here in... Well, this tactical bomber is currently in West Germany, which is over here. And what you can then do is you can tell all of these fighters and bombers what you want them to do. So if we click on Western Germany, we can see what we've got actually in operation here. They're on a mission. So our tactical bombers are set for close air support. They're assisting divisions in ground combat. We can also get them to bomb buildings, or we can get them to strike enemy ports. As well as tactical bombers, you've also got fighters that have various different missions, such as air superiority and interception, where they try and keep control of the skies. Now, the interface for this is a little bit different. You'll see there's lots of numbers, there's lots of different things. It can be very, very confusing. We can actually see where we've got things on aircraft carriers. We can see where we've got aircraft in bases. So you can actually see where all of your aircraft are and what sort of range they have. But again, the interface is quite confusing, and the tutorial never really goes very far to explain exactly how everything works. It does get you playing as far as being able to actually send some aircraft out and assign them a mission, but it still doesn't really resolve some of the mystery of a lot of these sort of interface elements. Again, if you mouse over pretty much anything, it will come up with some information, and that is one of the good things that Paradox do. You do actually get a lot of feedback if you mouse over stuff, but there are other places where they fall completely flat and miss out on important information. The third and final aspect of combat, of course, is your ground forces. And you can actually tell your ground forces to do things on an individual level. So if I wanted to, I could go and select a particular regiment, or particular division, like these paratroopers. I could select these paratroopers and I could go and right click on the enemy and say, I want you to move into this province and do something. But the main way that you want to use your armies is with the army orders builder, or the army battle plan. So what you do is you select an army, you assign a general or a field marshal to them, and then you set yourself a front line. Now, front line is normally going to be a border with another nation. Obviously, I am in France here, and we're currently at war with the German Reich, so we're along the French-German border. And then what you can do is you can actually set a number of lines. So we can say we want an offensive line. As you can see, there's already one here that we have set previously, but we can go ahead and sort of edit that. So let's just go ahead and delete the order. Will you delete that one for me? Yeah, and we can delete our fallback line, and we can delete our front lines from there as well. So we've got no orders set. So we're going to go select this army. We'll select the front line and put that on the French-German border. So now we have our front line, and our army will automatically move and line up to attack from that front line or defend. We can then set our offensive line, which allows us to draw a line through our enemy's territory, which is where we want our army to push forward to. And then we can also set other things like a fallback line, which is where we would want to retreat to should we actually get pushed back in combat, and allow us to recover. It's always worth having your fallback line behind a river, because attacking across a river or attacking into harsh terrain gives a great penalty. You can also see by looking at our army what their what their strength is compared to the enemy, so you can see that the enemy force is a lot stronger. Now again, in terms of feedback, the icons on the screen don't always represent what's actually going on. So for example, if we look here right where the mouse is, we can see that we have one division of infantry. However, just looking at it, we can see there's one division, but it doesn't tell us how many infantry are in that division. We know from our division designer that our infantry divisions have nine regiments of infantry. But what about the Germans? How many infantry do they have in their regiment? This is telling us that they have 1 artillery and 7 to 10 infantry. Whereas if we go and have a look at our own, we only have 9 infantry, and we have some engineers and a field hospital. So at a glance, this information isn't all that useful, because it only shows us the number of divisions and it doesn't show us the strength of the division. And the interface is quite messy. Admittedly, as you zoom out, it does sort of consolidate all of the icons. I'm just going to go ahead and let the game run. We're running at speed 3, and this is one of those games where you can actually run it between speed 1 and speed 5. Now, zoomed out, there's not an awful lot happening. As you zoom in, you will notice that the map is quite active. There are planes flying around, there are ships sort of patrolling through the seas. Most of this is just eye candy, just to make the map look animated. It's more of an abstract representation of the units you actually have in action, and you will find that they tend to pass through each other. And as I was saying, most of these models are relatively low resolution, which is fine, because at the end of the day, you don't really play these games zoomed right in. You tend to play them at a reasonable distance so that you can get a better overview of what's going on the entire map. Now, in order to get my armies to advance, what I would need to do is go ahead and activate this button here, and that would then get my army to carry out the attack order and move in and attack the enemy. Obviously, this is going to be a bad idea, because we're attacking Germany over a river into rough terrain. My army is going to get absolutely slaughtered if I try and do that. So you probably won't notice too many performance issues here on the video, because my recording software does cap the game at 30 frames per second, but there is definitely some noticeable performance drops at time. Now, the game actually cycles through in terms of hours, and there is a day-night cycle. Now, with the day-night cycle activated, it does look quite pretty, especially with the weather effects going. But you will find, especially when you're playing at higher game speeds, that first of all, it really does have an impact on the game's performance and frame rate. And secondly, it's almost quite a sort of a psychedelic thing. If we've actually zoomed right out, you can see the day-night cycle passing across the Earth like so. If we're actually zoomed further in, you'll actually see that the screen just sort of constantly flickers from light to dark and dark to light. And that really seems to have a huge impact on performance, so I usually play with that off. So that's really the game in a nutshell. You've pretty much seen everything that the game has. Now, I would say that if you are a fan of strategy games, this is probably a game that you will really enjoy. Certainly, if you're a fan of Paradox strategy games, I think you would enjoy it too. Now, if you have experience with previous Hearts of Iron games, you're probably going to be able to pick this right up and not have an awful lot of problems adapting to it. If you're a completely new player to the series like I am, and you've never played a Hearts of Iron game before, expect that you're probably going to have to spend a lot of time either watching tutorial videos on YouTube or reading Wikipedia pages and actually learning the mechanics and learning how the games work, because as usual, the tutorial information provided with the game really is lacking and doesn't really help to learn the game that much at all, and that's the thing that I find most disappointing about it. That said, if you've got the patience and you really want to get into a very fun and in-depth strategy game, especially if you like stuff that is World War II themed, then I think Hearts of Iron 4 might be the game for you. It's a long anticipated game. Paradox have a history of making very good strategy games. There are probably going to be lots of DLCs and patches and expansions, bug fixes and balance changes down the line to make the game better. That's pretty much par the core these days with most games, not just strategy games. But I would certainly advise you guys to go and take a look at this if it's the sort of thing you're into. Even though I'm still learning the game and I keep making mistakes and there's a lot about the game that I am yet to learn, I have been having a lot of fun playing it. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope you found this video useful. If you have, please remember to like and subscribe. I've been Unstable Voltage, and this has been Hearts of Iron 4. I'll see you guys next time, and until then, goodbye for now.